caption case do hereby find the defendant, Skylar Richardson, not guilty of the offense of involuntary manslaughter. Count 3, child endangerment. We, the jury, find the defendant, Skylar Richardson, not guilty of child endangerment. Verdict form number 4. We, the jury, in the above captioned case, find the defendant, Skylar Richardson, guilty of the offense of abuse of the corpse.
Every trial is a search for the truth. We bring in jurors and we ask them to listen to all the evidence and then tell us what happened. And that's exactly what happened today out in Ohio. The jury spoke clearly, the jury spoke loudly, and they were only deliberating for 4 hours and 25 minutes before they came back with this verdict in a case that many thought was very complicated, had some really difficult issues to deal with. You know, when does life begin? Did life begin in this case? But in the end, in 4 hours and 25 minutes, they said not guilty. And what they said was, listen, this child was not born alive. Because that's the question that they had to answer for the first 3 counts of this indictment. Was this child alive? If that child was alive, it would have been guilties across the board. But across the board, it was not guilty, not guilty, not guilty. So what does it mean? What does it say? How important is this? Well, it's very important. Because when you look at this case and you look at why this trial occurred, it occurred because of what Skylar Richardson said in a second interrogation. Not the first interrogation, but the second interrogation. Both without an attorney. In both situations, police were trying to get her to confess. And they thought they did in that second interrogation. And it was after that second interrogation, immediately thereafter, that she was arrested and she was charged. And that's why there was a trial. Well, today the jury said, you know what? That confession? No, that was not a confession. That was manipulation. That was 2 detectives taking advantage of a defendant, lying, promising things, and then the worst part, putting words in her mouth. And then when she regurgitates their own words, taking them as, she did it. As a matter of fact, they got her to confess to something that was factually untrue and proven in the court and by science. And the defense pointed it all out today. The jury listened, and the jury spoke the truth. My biggest moment of the day.
Hand the verdict forms to Mr. Mullins in advance of the reading of the verdict. I want to thank each of you for your service. After this, you will be discharged from your service. You'll be returned to the jury room, reunited with your electronic devices. I have a couple of minutes that I would like to talk to you, and then we will get you on your way. You will be able to speak with anybody about the case that you would like, but you are not required to do so. Whether you decide to speak to anybody is a matter of your own free choice. So, defendant, please rise. With regard to count 1, we, the jury, in the above captioned case, find the defendant, Skylar Richardson, not guilty of the offense of aggravated murder, and there appear to be 12 jury signatures affixed. Verdict form 2, involuntary manslaughter. We, the jury, in the above captioned case, do hereby find the defendant, Skylar Richardson, not guilty of the offense of involuntary manslaughter. Count 3, child endangerment. We, the jury, find the defendant, Skylar Richardson, not guilty of child endangerment. It does say we further find the defendant did not cause serious physical harm to the alleged victim, but that finding is not necessary as a matter of law. Verdict form number 4, we, the jury, in the above captioned case, find the defendant, Skylar Richardson, guilty of the offense of abuse of the corpse. Ladies and gentlemen, are those the verdicts of the jury? You may be seated. All right, again, you are now discharged from all your service. Does either side wish to have the jury polled?
No.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, you will now be returned to the jury room. Thank you for your service. Mr. Mullins is going to give you back your phones and such, and I will see you in a couple of minutes. outside the presence of the jury. Anything additional from the state?
There, Your Honor.
Anything additional from the defense?
No, Judge.
The court will order that the verdict forms be filed. I will draft an entry accepting the verdict forms. I'm going to set this matter for sentencing tomorrow at 11 o'clock. I will order a pre-sentence investigation between now and then. So court services will conduct a pre-sentence investigation. They can tell me that they can get that done between now and tomorrow. Bail for the defendant is hereby revoked pending sentencing. We'll see everybody tomorrow at 11 o'clock. That's all.
All right. Court's in recess.
She may have been taken out of the courtroom in handcuffs, but make no mistake, this was a huge victory for Skylar Richardson and her entire family and her legal team. Not guilty, not guilty, not guilty on the three most serious charges. Guilty on the final charge involving the corpse and the burying of the corpse in the backyard. We're going to deal with that tomorrow with sentencing, but the headline today is that Skylar Richardson now has a life to live. And that life will begin very shortly as someone who has a future, someone who will have to pick the pieces up of her life, try to come to somehow what she went through and what she did, she has to come to terms with, okay? Because she knows she did something wrong. It was terrible. And I've got to think that the jury may have thought this. I know it's what I'm thinking. She may be thinking, her parents may be thinking, that if she had just spoken up, that baby would have survived. And she's got to come to terms with all of that. Because that baby had a heartbeat 11 days before that delivery date. And she did nothing. And she did nothing. But, and it's a huge but, not guilty of murder. This jury spoke loudly today. Joining me from outside the courthouse in Ohio, Court TV legal correspondent Chanley Painter. Chanley, we have been on the air for a while here. You have been in courtrooms around the country during verdicts. There has been none like this yet. Describe that moment for us.
You're correct. Nothing like I've ever seen inside this courtroom. You could hear a pin drop as the jury entered. We were all waiting to feel the anxiousness in the courtroom. It was packed, standing room only. As the jury entered, they didn't look at anybody and sat down. The foreperson was one of the 7 women on the jury panel. She handed off the verdict forms to the bailiff, and as the judge read it, I've never seen this before, Vinny, but the women on the front row of the jury box held hands as the verdict was read. Of course, behind Skylar Richardson was her family. For the first time, her mother was in the courtroom today. She was under subpoena, not allowed to be there throughout the trial. You could feel the emotion. In fact, it was so silent in the courtroom, all we could hear were the sobs of Skylar Richardson as not guilty was read, not guilty was read. And then after the second not guilty of involuntary manslaughter, that's when the gallery reacted. You could tell that that family was on pins and needles for those top charges. And when they heard both were not guilty, it was like they melted. You could hear the relief from that side of the courtroom. And then go over to the prosecution side. Stern looks and faces from the prosecutors, behind the prosecutor, all trial long. tearful, didn't seem pleased with the outcome, and rushed out of the courtroom when it was over.
And that's understandable. I mean, Skylar was carrying her granddaughter, and Skylar did not do what an expected mother should do, whether she knew about the pregnancy or didn't. At some point she did. At the point she did, that baby had a heartbeat. But there's a difference between that and aggravated murder or involuntary manslaughter in the state of Ohio. Huge difference, and the jury understood that today. You know, Chairman, this trial was so difficult on so many different levels because everyone feels terrible about what happened to baby Annabelle. Everyone knows that Skylar didn't do what she was supposed to do. Yet at the end of the day, the jury was able to parse that difference. How did the jury appear? Like holding hands? I'm trying to understand any way to gather what their emotional state was. Was there any sense from them that this was it was only 4 hours and 25 minutes, but was still a difficult decision?